Have you ever witnessed strange lights in the sky or experienced missing time? If so, you're not alone. These high strangeness incidents happen to people every day, all over the world, and we want to get to the bottom of them. Since 1969, MUFON has been at the forefront of UFO investigations, and we're not stopping now. Join Alex and Ruben, a team of highly skilled MUFON field investigators with years of experience, committed to getting to the truth. We'll investigate UFO events through guest interviews and witness accounts, analyzing data from various sources. Let's work together to unravel the mysteries of the unknown and get answers to the questions that have been unanswered for so long.
Hello and welcome to another episode of MUFON Up Close. My name is Alex Tusia and joined with my co-host Ruben Uriarte.
Hey, Alex. Hey, it's that time of the year, huh? We're closing in, and we have Christmas coming up. Did you have a great Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Got to spend some time with friends and family. Looking forward to some more of that in the upcoming holiday season.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's going to be a busy one. I've been fascinated with all the recent news on these drone sightings that have been occurring on the East Coast, up there in New Jersey, New York.
Yeah, a lot more drone information than we've seen probably the whole year. You can't help but wonder if that's maybe to place some doubt, and if they place the seed that there are these drones flying around, that if people do see strange things in the next couple of months, maybe they do just assume it's drones based on what they've read.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the increase of activity also in England, I believe, the UK, and over military bases. And I guess the question is, who's doing it and why? But that's a good point that you said, that maybe it might be a deflection or a distraction from with all the activity that's been happening, especially with the recent congressional hearings and the Senate. A lot of interesting things. I think 2025 is going to be very interesting.
Oh yeah, for us. There's a lot of there's always more questions, right? We get this information that gives us maybe some answers, maybe one or two answers, but gives us 10 more questions that now we're searching for. So it's always growing as what we need to know.
Excellent. It seems like we have a really great guest today, the Assistant State Director, and we would like to introduce him there, Alex. I do want to make a comment that he's the Assistant Director to Florida, and Florida comes like within the top 5 consistently of cases reported. Yeah, California, Texas, Florida, but these are those top, and several others. But it's been a state with lots of very interesting cases. So I'm looking forward to hearing Matt Kellison share his experiences and his investigations with us.
Yeah, it'll be great to hear from Matt. So Matt Kellison is a dedicated professional with a distinguished 30-year career as a Coast Guard veteran. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Technology from Purdue University and a Master's of Science in Aviation Aerospace Management. As the Assistant State Director for Florida, he has demonstrated a strong leadership and a commitment to advancing aviation interests in the state. Effective January 1st, he'll take on the role of State Director, where he aims to make an even greater impact. Matt is a member of the ERT and has been a member of MUFON since 2022.
All right. Hi, guys.
Matt, how are you?
Yeah, great to see you again, Ruben. Hello,
Yeah.
Alex.
Nice to see you, too.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So we always like to start off with our guests and ask them, how did you get into the UFO topic, and how did you, find your way to MUFON?
Well, it's something I've always been interested in. For even when I was like in high school, kind of thing. I, of course, I grew up in the 70s, so there was Star Wars and Star Trek, that kind of thing. So I was interested in sci-fi. Close Encounters came out, and I became interested that way. When I was I guess it was right after I graduated high school, right before I came into the Coast Guard, I had a sighting with my father. I grew up in rural southwestern Virginia. My parents lived on a lake. It's called Smith Mountain Lake, just outside of Roanoke, Virginia. And my dad and I were standing out on the back deck, which is kind of high up overlooking the lake. And my parents' house was nestled in a cove. And it was probably about 9-10 o'clock at night. I think it was probably September, late summer, early fall. And there was this super bright light up in the end of the cove where the lake was. It wasn't making any noise or anything, and it would dip down into the trees and pop back up. And my dad and I sat out there and looked at it for a good 15 minutes or so, watching it pop up in other places, and just really unusual. And we were trying to figure out what it was. We kind of came to the conclusion that the Virginia National Guard had been doing marijuana interdiction flights at the time. It was Ronald Reagan, 1980s, war on drugs, kind of thing. And we kind of surmised that, well, it must have been one of these, Air National Guard or state police helicopters that were doing some, surveillance, looking for, for pot farms, because it was a rural area. And then I kind of didn't think about it until I went in the Coast Guard in 1987. Spent a year on a Coast Guard cutter down in the Caribbean, and then I got into aviation. And I worked and flew on helicopters for pretty much the rest of my career in the Coast Guard. And being around helicopters like that, I'm around them every single day for decades. And I guess at some point I realized that light that my dad and I saw was not a helicopter. That thing, if it were a helicopter, you could have heard that thing from 10 miles away. And it was so quiet on this lake, you could have had a conversation with somebody a half a mile away across the water, because the sound just carries. And so I kind of came to this realization that, I saw one. And, I kind of put the hook in me, and, I read a few books. I, read Whitley Strieber's book when it came out, John Mack, that kind of stuff. I was really interested in the abduction aspect of the phenomenon. Interestingly enough, I did 30 years in the Coast Guard. Out over the water, stationed all over the place. Hawaii. I just spent, I don't know, probably 12 years or so in Florida, Savannah, Oregon, just all over the place. North Carolina, Virginia. I never saw anything while I was flying. Nothing unusual or anything that stood out. I don't know that I was really looking, but certainly had the opportunity, to see something if it was out there. So I retired in 2017. Got interested in all the congressional hearings, and of course, December, the New York Times article came out. Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal. And I kind of like sparked that interest all over again. And I just started reading profusely of everything I could find. Then in June of 2022, that's when I joined MUFON. I had a sighting in my driveway. I was talking to a neighbor. My wife was standing out there with me. And as we were talking, I was looking off to the east. Now, I live on the west coast of Florida, just north of Tampa, or north of St. Petersburg. So the departure path or the approach path, depending on which way the winds are blowing that day, is just to the east of my house. And as we're sitting there talking, I was looking up. Being in aviation my whole career, I mean, I always look at planes that are flying over, so I'm really familiar with, what's in the sky, interested in whatever flies over the house. And I looked up, I saw, I believe it was a JetBlue A320 that had just departed Tampa. That was, probably 5,000 or 6,000 feet northbound departure. And then just above that, I saw a bright flash of orange. And I'm not talking about like a quick reflection like you would get like off of a Mylar balloon or something like that. I'm talking about a bright, deep orange. It was probably not quite the size of the moon, but slightly, maybe about half the size of the moon, which is pretty big. And it would come on for about 3 or 4 seconds and then go out. And then in another part of the sky, another light would go off. And my wife and I and my neighbor, we counted about 12 to 14 of these events.
Wow.
And I tried my best to get the orange flash on my cell phone, but I took 40 or 50 pictures just aiming at the spot, clicking, taking pictures the whole time. And I never got the flash. But what I did get were these little white triangles. But you have to zoom in pretty far. But once you zoom in on these little white dots that were up there, bright blue sky, perfect conditions, you could see like a white triangle. And there were probably maybe a dozen of them. And so I submitted all the pictures, and I really had done all of the investigative work for the field investigator that took my case. And he talked me into joining MUFON, and that's that's how I got here. So, but it's been a great journey, and with MUFON, I've just met some of the most incredible people. It's just a phenomenal group, really is.
Sometimes things just work out that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you were even a presenter at the last symposium, weren't you?
I did. I did was part of the best of the ERT. I did I spoke a little bit about one of the experiencers that I worked with last year. Her name is Ingrid, and she had a really interesting case, and I just went through the the details of her case. It was that case is 133420. And then it started in August of 1990, and and I'll just go real quickly through the presentation that I gave at the symposium. But so around August of 1990, Ingrid, she and her husband were living in Schaumburg, Illinois, just sort of in the Chicago O'Hare area. And in the middle of the night, she was awakened by a bright blue light, and her husband was asleep, didn't wake up. She tried to wake him up. She became paralyzed. She saw a being walk out of what would be her closet, and then came over and stood over top of her. She, terrified, trying to figure out what was going on. She had the sensation of floating, like she was floating up, and maybe through the ceiling or the wall, but she definitely had the sensation of floating. She said the next thing that she recalls is that she was in a very extremely small sterile room. There was another gray that was similar to the one that she saw in her bedroom that was standing over her and doing some kind of a medical procedure on her. And the whole time she's asking, what do you want with me? What do you just tell me what you want. I'll give it to you so I can get out of here. And there was never any real direct communication that she recalls. But eventually it indicated to her that she needed to get off of this table. And one of the things that struck me and this is what I love about being on the ERT when I talk to these experiencers, it seems like every single experiencer that I talk to gives me some little detail, that just obscure detail that really doesn't prove or disprove anything, but I think the little teeny details for me like kind of validate the story. So in this case, what kind of stood out to me was she said that when she got off the table, there was barely enough room between the table and the wall for her to squeeze through. And I thought, boy, that's an interesting detail for somebody to, that's telling me this abduction story. An interesting detail. And, even just speaking with these experiencers, they're very emotional about it. They, for a lot of people, this is nearly all of them, this is a very traumatic event. And so you can just hear it in their voice when they're speaking. This is not, I know there's maybe some hoaxers out there. I've done about 25 ERT cases, and all but one was absolutely credible, in my opinion. Just you hear that tone in their voice. You get to points in the conversation where it's, they have a hard time speaking. Like, these people are really traumatized. So it's those little details like that that really stand out, and it kind of it's one of those other validation points that I get in just about every case. So she makes it off this table. She's led down a hallway, like a ramp hallway. And then she is, next thing that she remembers is that she's standing in this gigantic room, this big circular room. There are other experiencers that are standing down in this pit. They're all frozen. They're all looking forward. She was able to see by looking through her, using her peripheral vision. She kind of got an idea of the layout. She could look up and look down, but she couldn't move her body. And neither all the other experiencers that she was with, they were paralyzed as well. And she said she felt like there were other, grays that were around, that were kind of studying. She said she felt like they were studying her reaction or the others' reactions to them. But she said really what was kind of stunning about it was that there was like a mezzanine or like a viewing area above it. And she could see multiple entities looking down upon, on the experiencers down below. And she described it as almost like a medical college, medical university, where you would have operating rooms with a surgical gallery above, where students could look down on different surgeries and use that as a teaching tool. And she said she had that kind of feeling that that they were being observed from above by these entities. So the next thing that she remembers was being loaded into she described it as a tube. And they communicated with her that this was the way that she was going to travel back home. And so they put her in this, she described it as coffin-like. They put her in this tube, and next thing that she knows, she's waking up the next morning in the bedroom next to her husband. She tells her husband about it, and he's supportive. But he kind of says, well, it must have been a bad dream or something like that. So, and that's kind of where her experience ends. And then the next part of it is kind of out of our hands. It goes to the providers, the outside providers that are able to offer, these certified hypnotherapists and, people that can dig deep and try to bring out the hidden memories and the missing time, portion of the cases. So, so that was the next step for Ingrid. And so her journey was really just beginning by contacting MUFON to get that ball rolling. So, and I was really happy that I was able to work with her and help her out. But it's really rewarding, just in general, being on the ERT and being able to help some of these people. A lot of them, they can't talk to their families. They can't talk to their coworkers. They can't, talk to even their friends without, fear of being ridiculed. So the MUFON ERT gives them an opportunity to speak freely in a non-judgmental environment, and where they're not going to be criticized, and they can just really get it off their chest. And a lot of these people have been carrying around this baggage for their whole life. I mean, most of these abductees, their experiences start when they're kids. They ramp up during their teenage years and then on into adulthood. And it's not having an outlet to even just speak about it is, I'm just very thankful that I'm on the team that was put together to help these people out. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, great, Matt. You pointed out something too. These little details that stay with you, and then you say, is there a connection? And you mentioned a bright blue light, and I hear that more and more in many of the cases that the witnesses observe a blue light, either a beam of light in the bedroom or in the home, outside of the home, or coming from the sky.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so Ruben worked with me on my last ERT case that I did. This gentleman was from Peru. He understands English really well, but has a hard time speaking English. So Ruben helped me out as the Spanish translator for multiple sessions with this gentleman. And he described a blue light, come to think of it, coming out of this, there was a black triangle that hovered over his house in Peru. And it was surrounded, had an aura, like a bright blue aura around the craft, and then it projected a blue beam. So I don't know what it is with, these blue colorations and blue orbs and blue beams. And it's interesting though, interesting commonality. And
I do. It's always nice to see the commonality, especially, in your case, where it's Peru, a whole other country, a whole other continent. To hear, similar things always amazes me.
Right. And there's a couple of other commonalities that I get a lot. So much so that, I think that they're statistically just almost impossible to be grouped like this. But I'm amazed that about half of the people, and like I said, I've done about 25 ERT cases in the last couple of years. About half of them, maybe like a third to a half of them, involve people with some kind of connection to either Native American spirituality or indigenous peoples or tribes. But in a lot of cases, they are full-blooded members of a particular group or nation. And they're from Canada and the U.S. But in particular, Navajo and Cherokee stands out. And I was really amazed that in Lou Elizondo's book, when I read it this summer, Eminent, he talks about a lot of the experiencers, pilots, I think it was what he was speaking about, that had physiological symptoms after encountering UAPs. I know he was working with Dr. Gary Nolan out at Stanford, to study this. And I think they were looking at I guess it's an area in the basal ganglia, the brain it's the caudate and putamen, and the amount of neural connections between those two parts of the basal ganglia. For people that are remote viewers, people that are experiencers, and these military people that have had exposure to UAPs, they all have a concentrated, I guess the nerve connections within the basal ganglia. It almost looks like white matter on an MRI. They're super dense compared to a baseline group that was studied. So, but it was interesting that Lou Elizondo in his book said that nearly all of the pilots or military people that had negative side effects from UAP encounters, that they were mostly had some connection to indigenous peoples, mainly Cherokee Indian.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I had found over the last 2 years, speaking with a lot of these experiencers. A super high percentage have some kind of connection to the Cherokee indigenous tribe. And then Lou Elizondo also went on to say, oh, and by the way, the people in I guess at the time this would have been the UAP task force, also had that connection. I think he said nearly everyone on the team had some connection to Cherokee some kind of Cherokee descent or in their family. So I just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I read that Matt in Lou Elizondo book, and that was really interesting. And another researcher that I'm also fascinated with his work is David Paulides on missing
missing
people.
411. Yeah.
Yeah, and he pointed out that the majority or a lot of the people that are missing are German. They have some sort of German ancestry. And so I thought, and now of course this connection here with people with an indigenous connection also falls into that whole mystery. So that's it. That's what's interesting about being in MUFON and having access to a database, and also looking at these commonalities, because I think there is definitely something there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my experiencer that I was working with, Ingrid, I think it was her grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee Indian. One of the other commonalities, and it didn't work out for Ingrid's case, but a large portion of experiencers that I speak with also have some kind of connection to nuclear programs. So whether it's nuclear power or nuclear research or weaponry. I had an experiencer whose mother worked for the State Department in the 1980s, drafted a lot of the Reagan era bilateral treaties. Like I don't know if it was SALT or START or one of those Reagan non-proliferation agreements. She drafted that, and she felt like her mother was an experiencer. They never talked about it, but she certainly was. I had another experiencer whose father worked at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. One who was like a physicist at one of the national labs working with nuclear technology. I had one experiencer whose father was on a nuclear submarine in charge of the the weapons aboard that. And it's like, I had one experiencer that grew up right next to a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania, I believe, like right next door to it. And her whole family worked there. So you got to kind of wonder, like, what's the interest in nuclear? It's just fascinating, but
definitely something there.
Yeah.
If I can ask, are you asking the witnesses directly if they have a nuclear connection, or does it come out organically as you're asking them about like their parents and such?
So usually it's at the end of the first session. If it hasn't been brought up, I will throw it out there just to see what they say. Surprisingly, most of the times it comes up during the conversation, and I don't have to prompt it, which I think that's important. You want to make sure that your evidence is coming from an unbiased subject. So but most of the time this is brought up without me prompting. Occasionally I will, and then I'll get the story, but and it's that percentage for me anyway. It's not quite as high as the indigenous peoples kind of connection, but it's definitely high. I'd say probably 25-30% have some kind of a nuclear connection there.
Wow. Yeah. What was interesting, I think I heard this on the interview with George Knapp with Robert Hastings. Robert Hastings is connected with nukes and UFOs and into various
UFOs and nukes.
And then another gentleman, David Jacobs. He was the Air Force official or worked in cameras, and he was involved in a launch out of Vandenberg Air Force Base of a Atlas missile, I believe, that was launched with a dummy warhead, and then apparently it got shot down by a disc object shooting a beam of light at it. And what I found interesting is that these two gentlemen now have shared that they've also had an experiencer contact themselves. That they are experiencers, and I'm finding that really quite remarkable. How these gentlemen, or various officials, have had their own personal experiences, be it either was it from the military or, and as you're mentioning, because of an environment, nearby military base or
Mhm.
nuclear reactor or any of the things of that sort. So yeah, this is extremely fascinating.
It's interesting. You during your intro, you guys were talking about the latest drone. I guess we could call
Yeah,
it a flap at this point, right? I mean, it's everywhere.
exactly.
Um, but I guess the history with it is, a few years ago, I think 2019, there was a lot of drone sightings out in Colorado, and then last year over Langley Air Force Base there in Hampton, Virginia, just around Norfolk. They had a bunch of drone incursions. I think that was earlier this year. And now they're, of course, in England around all of these, United Kingdom air bases where the U.S. has B-52 squadrons and nuclear capabilities, stationed there. Over New Jersey's on fire right now. I mean, I'm looking at Twitter and Reddit, and I try to steer clear of like a lot of the Facebook UFO groups. They can get kind of crazy at sometimes, but I'm just amazed at all of these things that are coming out. But I did see somebody that posted on Reddit either last night or this morning that had kind of a theory about the whole thing. And what he said was, so Putin has all but said that he would use tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine if necessary. And actually last week, I guess, launched not a nuclear warhead, but an ICBM, medium range ICBM. Was that? I'm trying to think here, make sure I get my news stories right, because there's a lot of conflicts going on in the world. But so there's a nuclear component to these conflicts that are going on right now. So you would think that, I would imagine that the U.S. is strategically moving a lot of these parts around the globe. And this gentleman on Reddit surmised that, hey, maybe all of the nuclear weapon movement is attracting all of these drones, whether it's foreign, a foreign adversary, or possibly the U.S. military just monitoring the movement of these materials, or maybe it's something else that's monitoring that movement. But yeah, it's definitely interesting how this is just within the last, like, I guess 3 weeks now, it's been going just off the charts.
Yeah, I think what was it, last year? There was, or the year before, over in Southern California off the coast by Catalina, there were these objects that were also hovering above some of the naval ships.
Oh, right. That's I think that was the those triangle pyramid shaped.
Yeah.
And they I think the DoD said they came from this Chinese registered cargo ship, but it was like 20 miles away, part in Long Beach or something, just something crazy. And then they came out and said, I think Arrow, maybe that was part of the congressional hearings when Sean Kirkpatrick was talking about that they had they called it not the halo. There's a term for it, but it's basically the geometry of the camera lens was creating the triangle shapes. Yeah. And so that's, I think, been disproven. So yeah, and it amazes me how much the federal government, particularly the DoD and the Department of Energy, they go to great lengths to debunk this stuff. And it's like, if there's nothing there, why don't you just give us what we're looking for, But the fact that there's so much pushback, on a lot of this stuff, when you'd think that if it was nothing, like why even bother commenting on it? But they make it a point to debunk stuff that maybe doesn't need debunking. I don't know.
Wow.
That
Oh,
goes-
go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say that just goes back to Project Blue Book days, where
Yeah.
they're out there telling people that it's swamp gas or it's something else ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing. Yes, speaking of that, the president's. I think Gerald Ford was involved with that whole swamp gas thing. That I think what was it? J. Allen Hynek came out later and said that was one of his biggest regrets was signing off on that disposition of swamp gas, because he knew it wasn't, but he knew if he sounded the alarm that he would be, pulled out of the program and he wouldn't have access to anything anymore. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, that was Gerald Ford, the senator from Michigan, that created a big stink about that. And interesting how many presidents have been interested in it and have tried to get information out, but so far haven't been that successful. Maybe Trump will when he gets in. I don't know, but who knows? We'll see. Fingers crossed, though.
Right.
Yeah, I was some friends of mine that are researchers from Mexico had also done some research on sightings by Mexican presidents, and they have different cases where these very large UFOs were escorting or flying above the presidential planes with the president, and then the president was viewing this object coming right over the passenger plane, or his presidential plane, excuse me, and also that the passengers that were within the plane also saw the same object. So I thought that was really quite interesting, and there was actually some work or the report got out with the local papers on that. So it's always fascinating seeing what's happening here in the United States is also happening globally.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting that I know that this latest drone thing is getting some attention, but I'm shocked that it's not getting more attention. If you look at the mainstream media, they'll have little bits about it, and it's always the drones and they're unexplained and the FBI is looking into it kind of thing. They haven't ventured into the other portion that we're interested in with who's flying these things. But I remember, so my mom was born in 1931, and she actually remembers in 1947 when went out over the wire that a flying saucer crashed at Roswell. That went out to the world, and she remembered it as as a girl. She also lived in Maryland in 1950s and remembers the UFO lights over Washington, and that rocked the nation. And she remembers that, and it's kind of weird that we live in this day and age where that stuff that's going on right now. The same thing that happened back in the 1950s over Washington, that's happening right now. And it's not even a topic of conversation for most people. It might be, it's just a news story at the end of the program, but it's just not, it just amazes me how it's not more prevalent in the news cycle over the last few weeks.
And especially the frequency, it's increasing.
That the whole thing really, it's interesting because most of the videos that I look at from this, and being in aviation most of my life, I look at these things and to me they look like 737s. They've got wings, they've got green and red navigation lights. They've got anti-collision lights. They have landing lights up front. To me, nearly every video that I've seen looks like a conventional aircraft.
Yeah.
And I know that some of the witnesses have said they're making crazy maneuvers and that kind of stuff. And it makes me wonder if maybe the DoD is throwing aircraft into the mix and throwing drones and that, military drones into the mix just to kind of create confusion, that there's all these unusual craft flying over, but hey, they look like airplanes. They look like conventional aircraft. And I don't know if they're maybe doing that to take away from the story so people aren't as curious. I don't know. The whole thing is interesting. Have you guys kind of noticed the same thing, or
I saw some video footage and I thought, well, these things look like you mentioned the lights and how there might be some sort of conventional aircraft. And then I saw some other interesting footage of some objects, and it didn't seem to fit the conventional description. And
right.
And I think also it reminds me. I think you're probably familiar with NARCAP, National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, and I was also a member of that. And back in what year was when we had the big sightings over O'Hare International Airport, where the pilots and the flight crews and the maintenance folks saw a saucer-shaped object above the airport.
Yeah, gate 17. I think it was gate 17. Yeah, I always wanted to go there. Next time I go to O'Hare, on my bucket list to go there.
and the big thing that NARCAP was especially concerned about was the increased use of drones and how that could be an aviation hazard waiting. These things appearing near the runways and also these objects hovering over the runways and pilots about to take off or come in and land and avoid a collision. And that's been also reports happening internationally as well. It kind of reminds me of that this is a flap that we're involved in or witnessing, and the fact that it could be potentially a hazard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oncoming aircraft.
I did see there was a medical helicopter. This was in New Jersey. I'm not sure which town, but there was a medical helicopter that was trying to land on a hospital landing pad that had to abort their approach because of one of these drones. So to me, that's pretty significant. They're interfering with, potentially, some life-saving, that's going on. So hopefully we'll get some more info, and hopefully it'll be the, what the kind of info that we're looking for, not just, gaslighting. So it's interesting though, we were talking about, airport incursions like O'Hare, and we had a case here in Florida. This was down in Sarasota last October. So, and I have some information on that. It was so this is case number 134831. And there's a video that goes along with that. The story behind it is there was a gentleman at the gate waiting for his flight. And he looked out and he saw a silver chrome sphere, looked like it was, bigger than a beach ball, maybe 2 or 3 feet in diameter. And it was just casually floating by the window. So it wasn't over the runway, it was over the ramp, but it was visible from by everybody in the airport. And he took a video of it. We ended up sending that video into the MUFON's photo analysis lab. And I believe it was Seth is who did the study on it. And, he came back and said, hey, this is an unknown. It's exhibiting different features that aren't prevalent in just like balloons and that kind of stuff. It has like an aura around it that you really can't see in the video. But also put some zoomed in. I used Adobe Premiere Pro and zoomed in on it and took some black and white stills. But like I said, that was 134831. I don't know if you can pull that up, Alex.
Yeah, let me pull up the video and we'll start with that one.
Wow. So that's the video that so that's not the original video. That's the stabilized video that I, with Premiere Pro, I just zoomed in and centered on the object to get a better look at it. But then there's the full version shows, it doesn't show it any clearer than that, but it shows the chairs and stuff within the with at the gate area. What's interesting is I just saw, it's been circulating the last week or so. There's somebody or multiple YouTubers, and I've seen it on YouTube, I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it on Reddit, where people are reposting that video there's the still photo from one of the frames. So it's definitely it's a chrome sphere. And you can see a little bit of the aura there that's surrounding it. But yeah, these YouTubers have hijacked this video, and they're saying that it came from Russia. So let's see if I can find that. Number 7. Yeah, so they're saying that it's coming from Pulkovo Airport in St. Petersburg, Russia. And it's, I don't know. I mean, it's great that stuff's getting out there. I think the way that it got out was the witness that submitted it to MUFON posted it very, very briefly on, it was Twitter at the time, I think. So, and of course, multiple people copied it, and now it's all over the place. But we got the original one, and we classified it as an unknown. It was interesting. It wasn't going exactly against the wind, but it wasn't exactly going with the wind either. It was kind of going like perpendicular or an angle.
It was moving. It was moving fast. That's it's faster than like a balloon would have been moving unless it was very high winds. But you said that it wasn't. So really,
right, and that wasn't speeded up or anything. That was just zoomed in.
You can tell that the guy filming it, they're having trouble almost keeping up with it as they're kind of having to move their phone to kind of keep it in frame.
Yeah, that was a great case, and we've had some really, really interesting ones in Florida. One of the other ones I wanted to talk about. Oh well, as long as we're on airports, we've had a few air show UAPs that were really interesting. We had one. This is actually one that I did. It was the Stewart Air Show. This was November 9th of this year. So it's down in Stewart, Martin County, Florida, Stewart, which is just north of West Palm, right there on the coast. And then the Stewart Air Show, November 9th, which was a Saturday. That case number was 139319. And there was an F-20.
I'm sorry, the case number? Yeah.
Oh, the case number was 139319. And Stewart Air Show. And so somebody was filming a flight demo of an F-22. And really quickly, so this was actually that's an A-10 Air Force.
This one?
Okay, and so that's the F. I can't remember if it was F-22 or F-3. I believe it was F-22. And so you can see there's like that little black dot just to the upper left of the jet. And it flies through, I think it was only in frame about 7 or 8 frames. And it was filmed at 30 frames per second. So it goes really, really quick. And then I isolated that and blew it up, and you can see it's sort of a similar thing. It's a round sphere. Yeah, and so, I mean, that's not a bird. That's not an insect. I did not send this one out to the photo analysis team, but definitely was unusual. Unfortunately, because of the 30 frames per second, it intersects with the jet. And I don't know if it went in front of it or behind it, but with 30 frames per second, one frame is on one side of the jet and the next frame is on the other side of the jet. So if it had disappeared for one frame, then we would know that it was on the other side, and which significantly increases the speed. But since we don't know, it's really hard to tell what the speed was. I mean, it could have been 15 feet in front of the camera, or it could have been a half a mile away on the other side. But yeah, you just hard to estimate. But just judging from the shape of it and the acceleration and the movement, it got classified as an unknown. The previous picture that you showed was an A-10 that was performing at that air show the day after. So that would have been November 10th. Somebody snapped a picture, and these new cameras, when you zoom in on it, I guess the AI component tries to smooth everything out so it's not fuzzy. So that looks a little bit unusual, but I think it's, I believe it was a Samsung Galaxy phone, and zoomed in all the way. And if you look down at the bottom, there's like a cigar-shaped object. But I just thought that was interesting that same air show, 24 hours later, different, flight demonstration, and we're seeing these, these objects enter these pictures, and at the same air show, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
There was another one. So this was actually October 2022. This is case number 129877. And that's the Orlando Air and Space Show. There was an F-16 demonstration. So I think it was a flight of two F-16s that were doing a low pass, in front of the audience. And the witness videotaped the entire sequence. And just a very short part of that sequence, there was looked like a tic-tac, shaped object that flies. It looks like it flies right in front of the jets. So that was another air show anomaly that we investigated. And I take a lot of photos. I'm a pretty avid. I consider myself I'm definitely not a professional photographer, but I definitely consider myself an amateur. But I take a lot of photos, and I always look for stuff like this in my photos, and I very rarely see this stuff. When I do, I can usually differentiate whether it's a bug or a bird, just because, and especially the longer the exposure, the more you get the kind of it's almost like a corkscrew effect. So as the bird flies by or the insect flies by, and its wings are going up and down through the course of the exposure, you'll get, it almost looks like a corkscrew. Mm-hmm. And I know years ago people saw that and they called, I think they labeled them as rods.
Yeah.
There was a whole thing with that for a while. That kind of went away. But all of these things that we're seeing at these air shows, they don't have those characteristics of wings that are really prevalent when you see a bee or a dragonfly or a bird or something like that flapping its wings. And they're super fast. They're so fast that you have to go frame by frame to find them. But then when you do, then it's, oh wow, then they stand out. So.
No, thanks for sharing. Those were a couple of good ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we hop into some more, we're just going to take a quick break here.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Great work, Matt.
Yeah.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
The experiencer phenomenon is happening for a lot of people just like you all over the world. People are telling very similar stories about personal encounters with non-human intelligence. The Mutual UFO Network has research, resources, and support to help you make sense of what is happening. Our experiencer community is growing every day. Join MUFON, find your friends.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected. Only at kgradb.com.
And we're back. Matt, just so many good cases you've worked on. Thank you so much for preparing and sharing some of these pictures with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Matt, I just wanted to share a while back, we have what's known as Fleet Week in October, when the Navy will be bringing in their ships and opening to the public, and then we'll have an air show by the Blue Angels. And there's been several incidents where people have captured a strange object close to the formation. And then what's interesting, whenever they're flying in, they have like a 5-mile or 10-mile corridor, but that a no-fly zone, in other words.
Right.
So it's interesting when people say, "Oh, I caught something here. I can't explain it." It doesn't happen often, but I remember our chief investigator had a real interesting photo that was sent to him by a witness, and we determined that it was an unknown.
Yeah, anytime there's like an incursion of airport airspace, it's a big deal. I mean, I've seen flights go around on approach because there were birds on the runway. Stuff like, a bird getting sucked into a jet engine is a big deal. Looked at what happened to Captain Sully with up in the Hudson. Was it East River, or I can't remember. I think it was the East River. So birds can do significant damage to jet engines, and so a silver ball flying through through an air show, like closed airspace, is this is a big deal. And I think they're just so fast, like people aren't catching them.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But
a lot of people seem to see these things kind of after the fact. They're looking at their pictures and they say, "What's that?" Versus they see at the air show and then start filming.
Yeah, I would say just based off of the speed, I think it would be almost impossible to catch with the naked eye. Just it's so fast. But keeping with the air show, I guess, well, not really air show, but the aircraft. We had a great case back in December of 2023, so just a little over a year ago. This is case number 135664. And this was investigated by David Toon. He's a Florida investigator. He was a chief investigator for a while. I know he had to step back from that a few years ago, because of his job. But he's still an investigator for us, and he did this case. It's, like I said, December 5th, 2023. It happened about 12:45 in the afternoon. And so this is an AI rendering of what the scene sort of looked like. There were actually a few other vehicles involved, but this was investigated on site by David Toon. I was there myself, and then another one of our Florida investigators, Becky Villar, went as well. And we met with the witness. She said that she was on her way home. She was driving this Route 19 through the Ocala National Forest. So it's Central Florida. Ocala National Forest, I can't remember how many acres it is, but it is massive. And it's just, I guess, probably a 15-mile, 20-mile stretch of highway that looks identical to what's in this AI rendering. Just straight road and pine trees on both sides. So she's driving along. She's got her dog in the back of the car. There's a semi truck in front of her. There's a station wagon behind her, and then there are two cars in the oncoming traffic. So she was traveling northbound, and then the other two cars were in the southbound lane. She had her dog, like I said, she had her dog in the back seat. The dog started screeching like it was in just incredible pain, and then about that time, this sound was heard that just emanated the whole car. It came from outside, but it just this really loud, roaring, screeching, metallic sound. And at that time, everybody's car on that stretch of highway died. All the cars came to a rolling stop. Now that truck is a diesel truck. That's not, once you get a diesel engine going, there's no electronics involved. I don't believe. Maybe modern trucks nowadays have some, fuel cutoff or something if you lose power. But even that semi truck, it rolled to a stop. And it was so sudden that nobody even had a chance to pull off the side of the road. They were in the middle of the road, all 5 cars. So everybody's kind of trying to figure out what's going on. They're starting to step out of their vehicles. And at that point, a very large black triangle came flying directly overhead. The witness was an Air Force veteran, and she was familiar with, aircraft and that kind of stuff. She said that this thing came flying over at low level, about 600 miles an hour, incredibly fast. She said that it was so low that it took the top of one of the pine trees out, and then flew off. So the craft was moving from west to east. And then a few minutes later, or a few seconds later, these two U.S. Air Force F-16s, they could have been, Air National Guard, but U.S. Air Force F-16s came flying over following this thing. Now, everybody on the road is just standing there trying to figure out what's going on. They are traumatized. The truck driver, both of his ears are bleeding. Oh, wow. One of the other drivers, their ear is bleeding. One lady, I think it was in the northbound or the southbound traffic. She just got out of her car and sat down on the pavement and cried. She really traumatized by this. And then their cars started back up. Their cell phones, I forgot to mention, all their cell phones died. So their cell phones rebooted and started back up. And I think they were just all so freaked out that, they just wanted to get out of there. So they all took off. They didn't exchange any information or anything. I was hoping that one of these other witnesses would come forward, but they didn't. So maybe somebody that's hearing this will come forward and make a report to MUFON, and we can get, their side of the story. But just an incredible case. David did the magnetic survey on her car. Also looked at the clothing, and then also the dog to see if the dog was okay or had any physical effects. And the only thing that David was able to find was that on the magnetic survey of the car, he noticed that there was a marked difference on the driver's side of the car. He was using a magnetometer and he was measuring in microteslas. I know you can also measure in English unit is I think Gauss. It's always one of those weird words that I have trouble saying. But so he was able to also find another make and model of the same car, so we got a baseline off of that. And there was a big difference in the magnetic survey on the witness's car as opposed to the other cars that he was able to find, same make, model, and year. And it showed a lower magnetic readings on the driver's side, and then higher on the passenger side. And so the driver's side would have been the side where the craft approached from, and then the passenger side would be where it was going. So I don't know if that was related, but it certainly was interesting. We went back to the site, and so like I said, this is a miles and miles and miles of pine trees and no other real landmarks, maybe an occasional dirt road or something. And so I had the witness in the car with me, and we went back and forth and back all the way till it got dark, and we just could not find the right spot because I wanted to find the top of the tree that came off, and it should have been on the side of the road the way she described it. And I don't know if somebody came and picked it up, and it kind of reminded me honestly of Cache Landrum.
Right.
I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, where I think it was outside of San Antonio, Texas. I can't remember the year, but that sighting, I think that's some government agency came in and paved the whole road like within a week.
Right.
And then they ripped it up and repaved it. And it wasn't on the books anywhere or anything like that. So I had that thought that maybe somebody came and got it before we got there, because it was, I think it was I don't know if it was the next day. I believe it was the following day that when we got up there. So it was around 24 hours from the event that we were able to get on scene. But yeah, I really wanted that branch, and we tried our best to find it and just couldn't. But yeah, just a fascinating case. And David actually wrote an article for the MUFON Journal. It's the April 2024 issue. That's issue number 672, and he did a 3-4 page write-up on the investigation and everything. So everybody will have to go check that out. Like I said, April 2024, issue number 672. So, all right.
How big is your team that you're working with in Florida right now?
So we have 20 field investigators, approximately 20 field investigators. And then we have about 300 members, state members. But as far as the investigative team, it's about 20 people.
That's pretty good.
You have a good core team.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a little bit of statistics to fill everybody in. I know, Ruben, you talked about our rankings that come out. All of us that are in the state or assistant state director, the leadership. I mean, we're always looking for the CMS statistics that come out every month. But so Florida, like you said, it ranks in the top 3 to 4. It's usually California, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, I think are the top.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure those are the top 4 pretty much every month. So 2022, Florida had 433 sighting cases. 68 of those were unknown. So it worked out to about 16% for unknowns, which is a little high. I think 7-8% is kind of where we're looking. But for Florida, we had 16% for 2022. 2023 was a great year for us. 504 cases, 64 unknowns, and 13% of the cases were unknowns. And then, of course, 2024, it was a rough year for MUFON, with our system going down for a few months. So I know these statistics are a couple of days old, but this year we've had 192 cases in Florida, 33 unknowns, and that works out to 16% again. So we're consistent year to year. So that's no real spikes, but it's just interesting that our level of unknowns is a little bit higher than the regular average, which is like 7 to 10%.
I feel like with you being a coastal state, there's always more things kind of on the water that people are seeing. So I feel like that kind of gives you guys a little bit of leeway, because people are seeing things not only on land, they're seeing them on the water too.
Right. And, Florida is, we get some cold days during the winter. We had, I had to bring all my plants inside the living room the last couple of days because they got down in the upper 30s. But for the most part, Florida, it's warm year round, and we get a lot of visitors, part-time residents that come in from the northern United States and Canada, and during the winter. And so there's a lot of people outdoors year round here. There's a lot of water, and of course, you guys know there's a lot of weird things that go on, offshore. And so a lot of coastal sightings here as well. So, but I think it's just, we probably get a lot, same California and Texas, the same thing. The weather's warm, people are outside walking their dogs and doing stuff outside there's more of an opportunity to spot something unusual. So never a dull moment in Florida, that's for sure.
Do you have any good cases or stories of anything that's in the water?
Let's see. I'm trying to think if any of those are on my list here. So I've got a real interesting case. It's a historical case, but not a USO per se, but this one was case number 138123. It was a case that I investigated a few months ago. And I just have one picture from the case. It's a Navy ship, the USS Sims. Yeah, there it is. So the USS Sims is a Navy destroyer. And the witness from this case, at the time, he's 73 years old now, but at the time, this was summer of 1971. He was a 20-year-old radar man, and he was stationed aboard the WS Sims. That's a destroyer, DE-1059. And the ship had just gotten a new radar system, and they were off the coast of Florida, about kind of like in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. That's what, he kept bringing that up during the interview. But so there's several hundred miles off the coast of Florida. So just off of Jacksonville, St. Augustine, but, over 100 miles offshore. And they were testing their new radar system, and they were testing it with it was not radar, it was sonar. And so they were testing this new sonar that they had, trying to detect a friendly U.S. submarine that was working with them. And they'd been out there for several weeks, and the submarine would dive, and they would try to find it with the new sonar. And they've just been doing that on a daily basis for several weeks, testing out the new system. Now, the radar, so obviously for the listeners, sonar is underwater detection of objects, and radar is the above, the air detection. So it's 2:00 in the morning. This guy has watch. He's not on the bridge. He's in the radio room that's behind the bridge. So he's staring at the radar scope. And now this radar, it can pick up surface contacts and it can pick up air contacts, but it's mainly for surface. They're looking for other ships out on the water on the horizon. And so they get the reflective signature off of, the other ships and vessels that are above the water, and also aircraft in the air to a limited ability. I think, and it all depends on the angle of the radar antenna on top is the limiting factor there. But 2 o'clock in the morning, he spots on his radar scope these 3 radar blips in a triangle formation that are 50 miles away. So right at the very edge of the radars at the time, that radar's capability. You could look out about 50 miles. And it traveled. He noticed on the scope that these 3 radar blips were heading right toward the ship. And it took about 60 to 90 seconds to travel that 50 miles stretch. So if you do the math on that, that works out to, if it was going, if it took him 60 seconds, that would be 3,000 miles an hour. If it took 90 seconds, it would be 2,000 miles per hour. So definitely faster than anything in the U.S. inventory at that time, maybe an SR-71, but definitely not at sea level.
Wow.
So these things came in. They came to a dead stop right over the ship. Now, they had lookouts on the up above the bridge and on the bow and the stern of the ship that did not spot anything, but the radar return definitely showed that it was right over top of them. It stayed there for 4 or 5 minutes. It shut the whole ship down. All of the electrical, everything on the ship just went dark. And then it shifted over to the submarine that was maybe a mile away off one side. And it went over and hovered over top of the submarine that had surfaced for a few minutes. And then it zoomed off to the north. And so really fascinating case. I love these historical cases, especially when they involve, military, military people. So I started doing some digging. I went to the National Archives and I tried to get the deck logs through the National Archives for that ship. Now there's a ton of naval ship logs that go all the way back to World War II and beyond, where you can, and a lot of them are online. They're all stored at the National Archives facility in College Park, Maryland. But some of these things are online, but you can look in the catalog and you can see what they've got. Well, I could find records for 1970. I could find records for 1972. I couldn't find any records for 1971 for that ship. When I was doing the cross-reference to see if anybody else had reported this to MUFON, I didn't find any for that matched that. But when I went to New Fork, I did find one that matched. This was New Fork sighting number 13385, and that was July 2nd, 1971. So basically the same date, or close to the same date, same area. They were operating off the northern coast of the northeast coast of Florida. But this was the U.S. Navy's USS John F. Kennedy, which was the aircraft carrier at the time, not nuclear, but conventional powered. So same basic area. Now, this witness that had reported to New Fork reported a 200-foot diameter glowing sphere that hovered 100 feet above the ship for approximately 20 minutes, shut the entire ship down. So kind of the same thing that happened to this witness with the USS Sims, shutting everything off in the ship. But this was a gigantic U.S. naval aircraft carrier. And it's an interesting read. It's kind of long, but what got me was so they were heading to Norfolk at the time. As they were pulling into port in Norfolk, Virginia, the captain came over the closed circuit television that they had on the ship, and he made this statement. I'll just go ahead and read it. This is right out of New Fork's report. I would like to remind the crew that certain events that take place aboard a naval combat ship are classified and are not to be discussed with anyone without a need to know. And so that was 1970 off of Florida, and we're still kind of having that, maybe not with the surface ships, at least reports, but definitely with the Navy F-18s that are going out
Yeah.
over the military ranges. So interesting. Yeah, there's I wish that more military folks would come out and with their stories. I know there's a lot of them wait till later on in life when they can't be punished for going against their direct order. But
and I feel like that's
That-
what we're hearing is we're hearing
Yeah.
more of that. A lot of older people that are now less afraid, or just want to get their stories out, and that's what I love. I really love hearing the historical cases from people.
Yeah, I forgot to mention. So I went and looked up the USS John F. Kennedy's logbooks and National Archives. Their 1971 is not there either. So, hopefully one day I'll be able to get that. Maybe file a Freedom of Information Act or something to get that. So,
I was going to ask you, Matt, that I'm going to give you a call about this one case that I had. It was a fisherman. There were 3 of them, and they were out there by Monterey Bay. Apparently, Monterey Bay has like a very deep trench, goes down like the deepest part, maybe I believe 9,000 feet or something. And the fishermen said that they observed like a object coming out of the water, and that it was almost looked like a tic tac shape. More like, I forget how they describe it, but it lifted, and they saw the water dripping off the object. And in the background, they saw that there were other little small fishermen boats around, and then they saw the witness said they saw a Coast Guard cutter. And I thought, man, that is, if there was a way to I'll get all the facts, but I'd like to get your opinion on possibly contacting
absolutely.
the Coast Guard. See,
yeah, absolutely.
Whether or not they would say anything, but
right.
I thought the fact that there are potential witnesses, and the fact that there you have a possible Coast Guard.
Well, I can tell you, I know the Coast Guard doesn't have any kind of reverse engineering program for USOs or anything like that. So, their basic mission is, life saving and law enforcement. So, they're maybe not as tight-lipped. Although, I mean, it's a military service, so if you're ordered to keep their mouth shut, they certainly will. So, but yeah, that whole area out there is absolutely fascinating. I think. Who was it? Admiral Gallaudet, one of the people that testified at the last House Oversight hearing. I believe he had mentioned that area out there off of at Catalina Island, that area.
Right.
And I'd read something recently that, like the Google Maps, I guess there's that shows the underwater structure, that the underwater terrain in that area has been like erased. It's been blurred out, and for some reason I thought that was odd. So because I guess there's like a big plateau, underwater plateau out there. I mean, we're still talking thousands of feet deep, but there's some unusual structures underwater structures out there and I think that was one of Admiral Gallaudet's recommendation, was that, go out there and put a deep sea, submersible and check it out and try to map it. But it's just so fascinating to me that, we know more about the moon than we know about the bottom of the oceans on this planet. It's just incredible. But when you're talking about just the mass of water, the difficulty getting down there to those great depths, the crush, will just crush normal, anything that goes down there unless it's built to withstand that. Just a little side note here, which I thought was pretty cool. I was on I flew helicopters and as an air crewman on Coast Guard helicopters, and we had landed. We were deployed the air crew was deployed on the back of a 378-foot Coast Guard cutter that was doing a patrol around Micronesia, and we just happened to pull up over the I'm gonna pull a brain fog here. The Marianas Trench. We got to the deepest part of the Pacific, deepest part of the ocean on the entire planet, and had a swim call. So they just stopped the ship. The water was just flat, calm glass, and then everybody jumps off the side and swims around, and that way, you can say you swam in the deepest part of the ocean, on the planet. But yeah, it's just incredible. You see these, they send down. I've seen like styrofoam heads that they tie a weight on them and send them all the way down, and like they're just crushed down to nothing.
Really?
Just just the pressure at that depth. I mean, you're talking miles deep, and then the weight of miles of water above you. It's just unbelievable that we could even get down there to explore. So there's no telling what's down there. If these craft of these visitors, if they are visitors, maybe they're from here. Nobody knows, but they've definitely mastered the art of transmedium flight. So water, rock, air, space, whatever. Apparently it doesn't bother them, or they are able to maneuver pretty easily through them. So yeah, there's no telling what's down there. It's and I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, the LiDAR usage has really become prevalent. We see, like on the Skinwalker series, they do all the LiDAR scans, and I actually belong to a couple of LiDAR groups on Facebook, just out of curiosity. But I would suspect that maybe like within the next 5 or 10 years that type of technology would be able to be deployed to map some of the ocean bottom, ocean floor that hasn't been done before, because it's, I just can't believe with all the advancements that we've made, we're still really in the dark about what's going on down there. And it's right here. I mean, it's 20 miles off the coast of California, and we don't know what's down there.
It's amazing, all the mysteries that are behind it. I was just curious too, in your state, do you ever come across any cryptid type reports, anything out of?
Yeah, the skunk ape.
Yeah.
I know there's
yeah.
a Bigfoot conference in Ocala every year. I think the next one's coming up in April or May. It might be June, but sometime spring, summer, late spring, early summer. We were actually going to try to set up a MUFON booth up there. I know it's cryptids and UFOs, or sometimes they go hand in hand. We've had cases where Bigfoot is sighted in also along with a UFO, but so we're thinking about setting up a table up at that Bigfoot conference to try to get some more MUFON members on board with us. And but as far as cases, I did have a really good cryptid case from Alaska that I investigated. It was kind of an off the wall thing. This was, and I don't know if there was any pictures with that or not, but this was, let's see here. So case number 131852. Like I said, I don't know that there's really any pictures that I submitted for that, but number 5. So this was, I actually got it as an ERT case because it was an entity. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So, there's another picture.
Yeah, you got
with
two
this.
two others too.
Yeah. So that's the picture that I got. So the story behind this was May 14th of 2023. It was a Royal Caribbean cruise ship named Ovation of the Seas, and it was pulling into Juneau Harbor. This was, like I said, May 14th, 2023. This gentleman was standing out on the balcony of his room, and he sees this creature. He said it was about 3.5 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet tall. He thought it was a child. It was that small. And you can kind of tell in the picture, if you go back to the larger picture, you can kind of tell that based off of the logs and the trees in the background, that this thing is actually about half the size of a 6 foot. I mean, and it maybe that's just an illusion with this perspective, but it looks like this thing is about 3 to 4 feet tall, which goes along with, what the witness said. So he sees this thing and he's really confused what it is. He thinks it's a child. And then he starts to observe it walking. And he said it walked like an ostrich. And it just had the strangest gait to the way that it walked. And so he turned around, he ran back in the room and got his phone, came out, and he snapped this one picture.
Wow.
And he said he doesn't know why he didn't snap more of these, more pictures of, but he said when he snapped the picture and looked at it, he was just so mesmerized by what he was looking at. He said his brain was just completely confused. And he just sat there and watched it. And he said it did a 180 and started walking in the direction of the way that the ship was going. And then it walked off into the woods. But he said just the movement was very irregular, so much so that it creeped him out.
Wow.
And so I looked at the there. Yeah, you can see I figured out the exact position where it was, and that's coming into Juneau Harbor. And so I did a lot of research, and obviously this isn't really a MUFON thing. More of a cryptid thing, but I dove into it and to check it out, and I actually referred him to some other cryptid organizations that could maybe investigate. But what I did find was that there is a lot of folklore in the area, and it comes from the hopefully I get the names here right, that the Tlingit and Shimishan tribes. So Tsimshian. So they have a being that they call the Kushtaka, which translates to land otter man. And there was actually a story written about this. In the 1900s, there was a gold prospector named Harry D. Culp, C-O-L-P, and he wrote a really short story called The Strangest Story Ever Told. And it talks about this otter cryptid man that keeps terrorizing the group of these gold prospectors that he's with. And it's, I think 60, 70 miles to the southeast of Juneau. So, kind of the same area. I mean, Alaska's huge. So, 60, 70 miles away is nothing, up there. But I just thought it was pretty interesting that, there's this local legend, and it seems to be isolated to that one area. So this is Patterson Glacier and Thomas Bay area near Juneau. But the crazy thing with this case, and it has really just sheer coincidence, but it was one of these coincidences that kind of stops you in your tracks. And I'm sure that you guys, you both with MUFON, you've seen that. I know personally the amount of synchronicities and coincidences that have occurred since I joined MUFON and started interacting with other ufologists, researchers, and then witnesses. It seems like these synchronicities happen all the time. So much so that I have a log book where I'm like, anytime one of these weird things happens, I log it. So this guy, like I said, this happened in Alaska. The reason why I got the case was because I was on the ERT and there wasn't an ERT in Alaska. So it was, Dr. Medich, the ERT director at the time, was send out these ERT cases to, to other people around the country. So after I get done, speaking with this gentleman, he is asking me questions about, oh, you're in Florida. And I said, yeah. And he says, what part of Florida? And I told him, I'm on the West Coast and, just about 30 miles north of Clearwater, St. Pete. And he says, oh, I live there for a while. I grew up there. And I said, oh, what part? And then so he says the name of the town I'm in, and I'm like, oh, well, that's where I'm at right now. That's where I live. And
Wow.
and it kept going back and forth like this. We narrowed it down to this is his house. He grew up here, and his bedroom is this office, this home office that I converted one of the bedrooms into a home office. And as I'm talking to this gentleman, I'm talking to him from the bedroom where he grew up.
Wow.
And so he was already a little freaked out about this creature that he spotted on the beach. And then follow that up with, hey, I'm living in the house you grew up in. And I think at first maybe he didn't believe me, but I mean, then as we started trading, stories about the architecture of the house and that kind of thing, I mean, it's like he knew things about this house that you can't find anywhere unless you're here. And then the same, same way with me. And so he I think he was a little, like I said, I think he's just a little disturbed by the whole thing. And but it was just one of those astronomical, what are the chances of that? I mean, it's just, I don't even know how you would figure out the odds of that happening, but yeah, really weird. That's one of the stranger ones for sure.
Wow. So strange.
It is. You also have a number of other photos that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember the one of the disc-shaped object that was sketched.
Oh, that was probably one of the first cases I did when I joined MUFON. So, yeah, if you want to bring that one up, that one's great.
This guy.
That's it. I mean, it's kind of a plain looking shape, but it's got a great story to it. So, no photos with this one. That's what I always tell my witnesses. And Bob Spearing, the director of international investigations, I know he pushes this a lot, especially with Project Aquarius, where they're adding all of these drawings to the database. I've gotten in the habit of asking every witness to draw what they saw, whether there's a video or not, because you can get a lot of details, out of the different drawings. But yeah. This was a drawing of a craft made by a PhD level researcher. And I've got to be careful because she did not want me, she wanted to remain anonymous. So sure. I will just call her a wildlife researcher, but very, very prominent figure on the internet, easy to look up, wildlife photographer, but also researcher. And she was out so this happened August 22nd, 2019, and over by Cape Canaveral on the Indian River Lagoon. She was out in a boat, a little skiff, like a 13-foot research skiff, and she was setting, different buoys and equipment out on the water. She had a pair of binoculars with her. They were Nikon, fairly high-end Nikon 10x50 binoculars. She also had her camera in a wet bag in the boat. She was by herself. She said it was about 11:30 in the morning. Nice day out on the water, perfectly smooth. And she caught something out of the corner of her eye, and she thought it was a plane or something like that at first. And then when she looked back at it, her jaw dropped because she was looking about 300-400 feet off to her, to the north of her. She saw this. She kind of described it as like a football-shaped disc that was shiny, chrome, no light. And she's got her binoculars. She's looking at this through the binoculars, and she said it filled up. I can't remember the percentage, but I think she said it was like 25% of the frame was filled up with this. So, I did the calculations for field of or angular field of view, and to kind of get a rough estimate on the size of this thing. I think it came out to maybe 30, 40 feet, something like that. But she was looking at it through the binoculars. She said, no details, no seams, no rivets, nothing, just perfectly smooth top and bottom. And she realized that she had a camera with like a 400 millimeter zoom lens on it, because, taking pictures of wildlife and stuff. So without taking the binoculars from her face, she reached down and she's kind of feeling through the bag to get her camera out so she can take a picture of this thing. While she's staring at it, she said the thing disappears. And I said, well, what do you mean disappears? Like took off really fast? And she said, nope. It was like somebody flipped a switch and it was there and then it wasn't. And she said it just like instantly blinked out of existence. And she didn't know what to make of it. She sat on it for several years. She didn't report this until 2022. So, it had a lasting impression on her. But and it's probably one of my favorite cases. One of the first few cases that I did, and then also that, like I said, PhD level researcher, who is trained observer, trained in data documentation. She had all the equipment she needed, binoculars, GPS, field notes. She marked her position, made a note of the time. And, other than getting a picture of it, she described the sighting in great detail. I don't think that there's much more we could have gotten out of having a picture of it, although it would have been really, really cool. But yeah, that was a great case.
That's a good one. And I always like that, the drawings are always a little bit different. I always like seeing, people's interpretation of, what they're seeing. Sometimes I just get pictures with, X's and arrows showing, here's where it was, here's where it went. But I can really appreciate the drawing you just showed with the shading and giving you the right shape and everything like that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that was great.
I think Matt, you also included a video that I was looking at. I can trying to remember what exactly it was, but it definitely caught it.
Yeah, it looks like 127273.
Yeah, so that's a one of our field investigators. She's a state section director, Rusty Hester. That was one of her cases. And I thought it was interesting. It's got an interesting story behind it too. But so this was October 26, 2022. It was taking off of this gentleman's balcony around 11:55. So it's Palm Beach, right just north of Palm Beach Airport. And he said he noticed white tic-tac objects darting in and out of the clouds high above him. So he grabbed his Samsung S22 phone and started filming. And he said he saw, it was 9 to 10 black, non-reflective, tic-tac shaped objects that were moving across the blue sky. Now, I believe this witness did because it's black and white. I don't know if that was a setting on his phone or if that was something that was edited in, post-analysis. I know he's got some information, so there was definitely some video editing. But I guess there were 3 or 4 instances within that video where you can see the objects, moving in and out of the clouds. But what was interesting is that this witness, his father was a MUFON investigator back in the 70s and 80s and worked with Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and then also with James Harder. Which
James Harder, yes.
Yeah, with APRO. I think I don't know if he was the director of APRO. Might have been. Yeah, the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization. But he had all these crazy stories about being a kid and going over to Dr. Hynek's house, and he said he actually went to Betty and Barney Hill's house with his dad, and Dr. Hynek was there, and that I guess that during the dinner, Betty Hill said that they should go outside because there was something out there, and I guess they saw some UFOs. And yeah, that's interesting. And Rusty just sent me this a couple of days ago, so I haven't had time to dive into it too much. But Kathleen Martin is, she's down here in Florida too. So the next time I have an opportunity to talk to her, I'll have to mention that case to her. So I think she'll find it interesting with her aunt Betty.
And we'll go ahead and play that video for us. It's a 3-minute long video. So Matt, if you see anything, shout it out to us.
Yeah. If you have the ability to kind of like scroll, like fast forward scroll, because a lot of those you can kind of see the objects going in and out as you're scrolling rather than, I don't know, rolling the whole 3-minute video, because I know there's a lot of stuff in there that's not relevant. But
let me see what I can do.
Yeah.
All right. The answer to that question is no.
Okay. It's an interesting video, but it definitely shows the like these small, like tic tac shaped objects, moving behind clouds and popping back out. Pretty interesting.
What did you guys think it was that the witness picked up?
It's not birds. I've looked at it. I do a lot of, sometimes here in Florida, like today is a perfect day. It was bright blue, crystal, clear skies. And, a lot of times I just like going out with a pair of binoculars and just looking up. I know this sounds weird, but after seeing all these bright lights, these high altitude, bright orange lights going off above my house, several years ago, I'm always looking, to see that stuff again. But I'm amazed, like what you can see by just looking through a pair of binoculars at blue sky.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen there's lots of mating pairs of bald eagles down here, and I didn't realize that they could get up like to altitudes like that, but they're virtually invisible with the naked eye. But you get a pair of high powered binoculars out, you can see all kinds of stuff flying around out there. So
wow.
So yeah, I do that quite often. But buzzards, there's like 2 species of buzzards in Florida. There's the American turkey vulture, and then there's I think it's called the black-headed vulture, and those things are all over the place, over the entire state. They do high altitude flying. They don't move like what's in that video though. Yeah, and they're obviously moving way too fast to be anything else. But yeah, very very interesting case. So. Let's see how much time we got. So we're coming up on about
I think
12 minutes.
I think we could do one more. We got about 8 left.
Okay. The one other thing I wanted to talk about was a couple of IFOs.
Yeah.
So this one, that's all of this. It's SpaceX, the Falcon 9, Starlink Group 6-1. So anything on there, Alex, that's labeled February 27th, 2023. Rusty and I, Rusty Hester, we were actually going to do a write-up in the MUFON Journal about this. So this was February 27th, 2023 at exactly 19 7:53, or I'm sorry, 7:53 for everybody that doesn't speak military time. So 7:53 p.m. And it wasn't just one case. We had 15 cases within MUFON, not all in Florida. 15 cases from MUFON. New Fork had 7 reports, and I think all of these are still shots, but they basically, the video is just the videos that I had. They're all just slowly moving horizontally from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen. So it's pretty unremarkable. But we had cases. So we had cases in Florida, Pasco County, Florida, on this side of the state, Indian River on the other side of the state, Polk County, Palm Beach, Pinellas County down south, Zephyr Hills, Port St. Lucie, Sarasota, Florida, Miami, Florida, Naples, Florida, all over the state. We got this. There were reports to MUFON from Cancun, Mexico. Videos show the exact same thing. There was one from the one with the truck that's parked out in the field. That was a MUFON case from Spearsville, Louisiana. Same exact thing. And all of the times on these cases were same date, 7:52 p.m. or 7:53 p.m. So it's like about a 1-minute window where everybody from Louisiana we had one in from the U.S. Virgin Islands, I believe, too. It was basically like a cloud being followed by like a cylinder. Like I said, New Fork had related cases, a couple more from Mexico. One of them was in Boston, Massachusetts, and then Sarasota, Boca Raton. And then if you look at so I put this is off that flight. Yeah, that's it. I can't remember the website that does this, but they'll show you basically the trajectory. So we discounted this initially as a SpaceX or space launch. We get those all the time in Florida. They're really easy to spot. And these, it seems like every other day there's a rocket launch in Florida. But for this one, it was in the wrong direction because, Cape Canaveral's on the east coast. They launched the rockets either downrange to the southeast or to the out to the east. This one was in the opposite direction, and so initially we just discounted it as anything to do with SpaceX until I ran the the orbital path. So you can see the launch was at 6:13 p.m. and then at 7:54 p.m. It had orbited all the way, gone all the way around the Earth, and it was coming back from the northwest, and this would be the second stage, was located over the Yucatan Peninsula. And so what we found out was that was Starlink Group 6-1. It was the first time that these things that were called the Starlink Mini, V2 Mini satellites were deployed. And I guess they had some kind of malfunction because these things deployed at the incorrect altitude, I believe. I reached out to SpaceX for months trying to get just a comment from them to say, what's going on? We have this unusual thing. I was writing this article, and I just wanted more information about it. And really tight-lipped. I never got a response back from them. So yeah, Rusty and I were never really able to get. I guess we could have put that in the article, but I really wanted the the SpaceX, to kind of chime in and tell us a little bit more information, but. Yes, that was a really interesting case just because it covered such a wide territory and it was seen by so many people. So it gives me hope for another Phoenix Lights, kind of thing, And so the other one I wanted to talk about, this was just a rocket launch that was in front of my house.
We actually only have 2 minutes left, so I don't think we have time to share another one. Yep. In the last minute, maybe if you'd like to talk about, any kind of upcoming events you guys have at Florida MUFON, or how people can get in touch to join.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on X, so it's Florida MUFON. It's at MUFON FL, MUFON FL, and then we do have a website, which is it's Florida-MUFON.webnode page. So I think if you just type in Florida MUFON into Google, we've put in a little bit of money for search engine optimization. So hopefully if you just type in Florida MUFON, our page will pop up.
Oh,
So
yeah. I just wanted to add, speaking of the website, the MUFON website now it has a language locator. So when you go to the MUFON website, you see an article, and you look down to the forward left, you'll see an American flag. Click it, and it'll take you to any appropriate language that you want to translate it to.
Okay.
No, it's super
awesome.
helpful. Well,
all right.
Matt,
and
we want to thank you as we're kind of wrapping up here. Thank you for your time. We really enjoyed hearing all of your wonderful cases. Maybe we could have you back, at some point to hear more about what's going on in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 2 hours went by pretty fast. So thank you both for having me on, and really my pleasure coming on and speaking with you. It's been great
work.
Thank you.
Great work, Matt. Thank you so much.
And Ruben, thank you so much for helping me on that that ERT case. Yeah, you were a lifesaver.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.